Hey, Savannah. Today I'm going to be talking to my best friend and physician assistant, Lindsey. She is a practicing PA in Delaware, and she got me interested in using progesterone cream to treat a number of premenstrual symptoms. I have been so blown away by the positive results that I wanted to do a podcast with her to discuss the benefits and who could benefit from progesterone cream through all the age groups and all the stages of a woman's natural life and cycle. So today we're going to be going over what exactly progesterone is in comparison to estrogen, who can benefit from taking progesterone cream, who may need progesterone cream, and how it's going to affect different women at different stages of their menstrual cycle, whether that's menstruating, perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal. I hope you enjoy it.
I guess my first question is like, what exactly is this progesterone cream doing? I'm going to run through them all real quick, and then you can kind of answer as you see fit.
Okay.
What exactly is the progesterone cream like doing? Like, how is it working in this, like in layman's terms, right? What age ranges are open or like able to take it? You know, is my 21-year-old paralegal, should she be taking it? I'm 34. And obviously, I'm fine to take it.
I have another girlfriend.
It's perimenopausal. She's 38, and she's having hormone stuff. And every single thing that my friends are describing, they all match the symptoms that I've been experiencing. So in my head, I'm like, well, of course, you would benefit from progesterone cream too. And then I'm thinking of all my aunts, right, at every age range. So now, like, what does it do for the woman at 45? Like, perimenopausal, menopausal, and postmenopausal. What is it doing for each woman at each stage? And I guess maybe those are my first two big questions. And then the questions after that are more tailored.
Well, let's start with that. I think those are a great start. So progesterone in general is the balance to estrogen. Progesterone and estrogen together are considered female hormones, but they're present in all bodies and have receptors in every cell. So there are physiologic responses to hormones in every area of the body, the brain, the heart, but most what's studied is particularly related to female hormones. Progesterone is the hormone that comes in the latter half of your cycle. So to answer your question, what does it do for everyone? Could everybody benefit from this? Everybody, whether it's male, female, responds to progesterone. And it's all about what we're seeking when we are giving you progesterone topically or orally is balance to the estrogen. And the majority of problems that I see in all age groups are related to an imbalance with higher levels of estrogen and lower levels of progesterone, like your 21-year-old paralegal, all the way up until postmenopause. And even in certain cancers, both in men and women, it's an imbalance, progesterone and estrogen. But what we do when we give it topically, what solutions we're seeking is to balance the female cycle by helping to oppose the effects of estrogen that were already at play when creating. So when women have really heavy periods, lots of bleeding, lots of cramping, it usually reports to an imbalance. That's usually from an imbalance at high levels of estrogen and lower levels of progesterone. And when we add progesterone for women who still cycle, and at any age, as long as they're having a menstrual cycle, any person can take topical progesterone. In the second half of the cycle, usually anywhere from days 12 to 14, is where we would expect progesterone to rise. And oftentimes, because of our environment, we have synthetic estrogens from things like fragrances, soaps, lotions, detergents. that mimic estrogen, and therefore our natural production of progesterone is incomplete in what it needs to do because we have been exposed to so many estrogens throughout our environment. So the majority of women I see and speak with either have irregular periods, occasionally breakthrough bleeding, heavy cramping, and premenstrual syndromes from migraines, headaches, increased anxiety is a huge one, depression, all related to high levels of estrogen in the first half of your cycle and a lack of appropriate levels of progesterone in the second. And so when we supplement progesterone, we are balancing and achieving more of a natural state as we're intended to be. So when we add it, remind me the first part of our question. We're talking about who would this be good for and why would we be doing this, basically?
Yeah, so I guess that's all that was like a really good answer on what it's doing. And then I guess my question then would be like, okay, if it's doing all those things, then who all can take it?
Right. Okay. So any age. But and I should have clarified this at the beginning, and this is a very important concept. When I'm speaking of progesterone, I'm speaking of when we're talking about supplementing progesterone, I'm actually referring to bioidentical progesterone. The majority of pharmacology and prescriptive progesterone supplements are something called progestins or synthetic progesterone that is not identical to the natural progesterone your body produces. And that is a huge specification we need to acknowledge, because most women who go on oral contraceptives, whether they have estrogen and progesterone in them or even just oral progesterone, those progesterones are synthetic. They are not bioidentical, and therefore some of their activity can mimic estrogen in a way. And we want to limit the increased exposure to estrogen, because that is overall, by and large, the biggest problem I think facing America and probably the whole world, because of plastics, microplastics, and how those interfere also with our natural hormone production. So we don't want to raise our estrogen exposure any more than we need to. So when we are supplementing, it has to be bioidentical progesterone, because that is the only natural occurring, fully opposing source of estrogen.
Okay, I'm going to do a slight plug here. I obviously am not sponsored or anything like that, but the exact progesterone cream that I have been using, that Lindsey uses, that she recommended to me, and that we both purchased just off of Amazon, is the Organic Excellence Progesterone Cream for Women, Natural Bioidentical Progesterone Supplement for hormonal balance and support, 3.3 fluid ounces. And that is on Amazon, and it's right now saying one-time purchase is $29. And as Lindsey will mention later in the podcast, that should last you for about 3 months or 3 cycles. Okay, back to Lindsey.
And estrogen in general, again, it tells each cell in the body to replicate and grow, either grow in size or reproduce. Progesterone tells those cells to specify and become what they're supposed to be. And the reason we need to balance these things is that problem is what can create cancers, endometriosis, premenstrual syndromes, beyond. So when we're talking about why adding progesterone matters, we're talking about bioidentical progesterone. Every age group can take this and benefit from this. That's not to say that every person necessarily needs this. I mean, I will say this is the majority of my patients and my experience. But there are women out there who have perfectly regular cycles, who don't have premenstrual syndromes, who don't report symptoms. And I don't necessarily think they should supplement something just for the sake of supplementing. When we're taking something, we're looking for an outcome, or we're looking to improve symptoms. And that is how we largely assess what's going on in your body are reported symptoms. So for myself and many other women, the heavy cramping and bleeding occurring with our periods before we're in a perimenopausal state, progesterone can really help shorten the severity and reduce the cramping significantly. So if you are a woman experiencing heavy bleeding or prolonged cycles or cramping or pain, we would want to take progesterone on days anywhere from days 12 to 25 or 14 to 28 of our cycle, based on average how long your length of cycle is.
And can I interrupt, because that actually leads to another question?
Please, absolutely.
So this is my first month taking it. I started on day 12. My cycle, I had some spotting on day 23. Thought it was coming. It didn't come. So I continued back on. Today is day 25. I still don't have my cycle. Should I keep taking it or follow the instructions where it says stop on day 25?
We would want to stop on day 25 because what signals you to bleed is the withdrawal of progesterone. When you've not conceived during a cycle, the withdrawal of progesterone is what signals you to bleed. So we want to stop at day 25.
Wow. Okay. And then you were saying that it's safe for, any body, but let's talk about women and their cycles. So, basically, if you're a woman and you're having some of these gnarly premenstrual symptoms, you might be a good candidate for it. What about my menopausal or postmenopausal girlies? And then we'll talk about self-diagnosing and self-trying progesterone versus like going through a doctor. But I definitely am interested in these ladies with no cycle. What's going on there?
Right. So in our peri and menopausal women and women who have completed menopause, which menopause is defined as a full year without bleeding. Once you've gone a full year without bleeding, you are now you've completed menopause and are in a postmenopausal phase. I actually find progesterone to be most optimal for these women because as estrogen, basically, as we age, we decrease both our production of estrogen and progesterone as women. However, I personally find, again, progesterone production falls much more rapidly, and that is typically what is so irregular in our peri and postmenopausal women. We are still getting, again, exposure to synthetic estrogens, whether you're knowingly doing it or not, whether you wear fragrances, whether it's in your drinking water. We are still exposed to estrogen, and therefore we need to balance that. And there are no synthetic progesterones that we're exposing ourselves to, so we can't really balance this. So these women who don't have regular cycles but have not yet completed menopause, if you still bled, you still follow the rules of the 12 to 25 or 14 to 28 day topical use. If you have no period and have completed bleeding, you can use progesterone twice daily for 25 days. So you would use it throughout your cycle, like throughout what typical women would have a cycle. Your cycle is no longer occurring, and you have almost a steady state of progesterone and estrogen. But we still want to augment progesterone and increase our natural exposure to it to counteract our exposures to estrogens. And these women who are typically having issues, since they're not bleeding, they're usually having issues both with hot flashes, emotional dysregulation, much more prone to anxiety and depression, as well as sleeplessness. Sleeplessness is one of the most common issues I find occurring postmenopausally. Progesterone alone is one of the most effective treatments for sleep disorders related to menopause. And even in traditional medicine today is something that is considered oral use for. So all of these women would benefit. The only change is if you are still bleeding, even if you have somewhat irregular periods, you would still attempt to track a traditional cycle. They may fluctuate But your goal and topical progesterone replacement until you no longer bleed or go without a year without bleeding would be optimal treatment 12 to 25 days, give or take 2 days. And progesterone application can be applied either once or twice daily, morning or evening, based on the symptoms, again, that you're looking to correct.
Okay, and how do I know if I'm taking too much progesterone? Is it possible to overdo your intake of progesterone?
There is such a thing as too much progesterone. Again, our bodies really are symphonies, and we want to find the right balance of all hormone exposures. And that is something that no lab work can really tell you. You really just have to go by feeling. So I always would recommend we start lower in progesterone replacement and then increase as we see fit.
And so you were saying for my postmenopausal girlies, they're just doing a 25-day cycle. If you're having any form of bleeding, you're not completely menopausal or postmenopausal. You're going to try to do your best to track it on the correct days. You said it was day 12 to 25 or 14 to 28, depending on the average length of that individual cycle.
Correct. So any bleeding you would start your cycle tracking, that would be your day 1. And then until you would wait 12 to 14 days, start your progesterone therapy. If you do not bleed, you could anticipate when your regular cycle would occur, whether that be 28 to 30 days, and then restart your cycle tracking from there. 25 days, and then it's a 5-day break.
Gotcha. And then back on. And I like that you touched on what does count as day 1 of your cycle, and day 1 is your first day of period, menstruation, bleeding.
Correct.
Perfect.
Correct.
And then what are some symptoms of, so I'll use myself, for example, and I love that you said about sleep. That's been the biggest thing I've noticed is the sleep. Oh my God, it's the chain good.
It is. It's drastic.
It's delicious. Yeah, it's delicious. But so basically it's safe to kind of self monitor, or what am I trying to say? Self-experiment. Like I don't have to go through an for this. Like if I'm feeling some type of way, like let me get my own stuff and let's see how I feel. Right. And I guess that leads me into almost like the second part of the question, which is how do I know when I'm fucking up? Like how do I know when like oops, I'm too much progesterone?
That is so fair.
You know?
So to answer the first part of the question, I still, the healthcare provider in me always recommends basic lab work. If you are having and experiencing any premenstrual symptoms, recurrent migraines, issues with sleep, we should always have at least basic lab work. And main basic lab work includes complete metabolic panel where you can assess your kidneys, liver, and electrolyte functions, your complete blood counts, make sure you're not severely anemic or suggestion of iron deficiency, and a thyroid panel, because the thyroid is highly related, and thyroid function highly related to our sleep quality, our emotional regulation, our periods in and of themselves. So we should have basic lab work. And I do believe in general that everybody should have a practitioner that they trust. Admittedly, most traditional practitioners are not familiar with these concepts or are taught other ways of regulating hormones, which carry greater risks, in my opinion. So you have to, I suggest you seek someone you trust in counseling. But if you have had basic lab work, you have a traditional or some sort of established wellness check, and all the basics are running right, there's no reason any woman could not try topical progesterone to help alleviate, I would say, mild to moderate symptoms of menstrual cramping, irregular bleeding, mood fluctuations prior to periods, excessive menstrual bleeding,
Could you
project
give me a small, medium, and large price point option? So I want the price point for like, what's the recommendation for the girl that doesn't have health insurance? She's 25. She is just making ends meet, and she might like, are these panels expensive? Do they take a long time? What if she wants relief today? What about the lady who's in her 30s? She's got the time. She might want to do the panels. And then what about the person who has the finances and wants the whole shebang? Could you give me like a small, medium, and large tailor fit to each one?
The beautiful thing, which I think a lot of people don't know, you can order your own lab work. And if you are a cash pay person or someone who is uninsured, LabCorp and a lot of other labs have cash pay pricing where you can get the blood work that I'm suggesting, a complete metabolic panel, a complete blood count, a TSH, and a free T4 level. You can get these 4 lab tests likely for under $150. And so I do find it worthwhile. However, if you still want to try something, progesterone will never be contraindicated in any condition. It's safe to use, again, in the right setting. And yes, if you are experiencing irregular periods and you have not had routine follow-up, it would still be safe for you to attempt to regulate and apply this yourself. I would just not overlook these very common potential other causes of irregular bleeding or hormone issues.
Tell me the test. Okay, so I guess once you get those tests back, sometimes they're hard to read. Like, I
would say in general, and what most labs would consider normal for a red blood cell count at a woman would be 11.1 or higher. If you're lower than that, it doesn't mean necessarily you have a problem. It could be related to heavy bleeding. But I would be open to helping interpret. The problem is labs don't mean as much without a history and physical behind them. So you would really ideally, again, seek a healthcare provider and the counseling of them regarding all of these issues, because it is overwhelming to figure this out yourself, quite frankly. We just know so much now that it's almost, it's extremely difficult to even simplify and explain. So I still always find, again, finding a primary care that you trust, or I know Function Online is a functional medicine practice where they're trying to reach more people. So you have access to a healthcare provider. They pay for your labs. You have basically an annual membership where you get 2 sets of labs in a year, and it's $450. And yes, that is expensive, but for a year's cost, and that is actually less than what most people, that's drastically less than a deductible that most people would pay for their health insurance. And you're still able to ask questions because everybody's individual. There is no one size fits all in any healthcare. I mean, in general, progesterone is very, again, safe and beneficial. But like I said, there are women who may or may not need this. And I think each person is so individual that they deserve an individualized treatment plan. So these are benefits that help many. But to speak specifically into your own individual health, I think it's one of the best investments you could ever make is find someone who you feel you can trust to ask them the questions you have about your healthcare.
I feel like so many times when I listen to podcasts, they give like amazing advice, and then they'll be like, oh, but like, check with your primary care physician before you do that. And I still don't have insurance.
I don't have a primary care. I've been here talking all this shit, and I don't have fucking primary care. I've had labs done,
Me too.
What you do when you're in medicine often is that is where you start. And like, I am privileged to know what's concerning and what's not, but I still can't be objective with myself. I will tell you, though, I attempted to make a gynecology appointment. This was 6 months ago. My appointment is October of next year.
Holy shit.
That is the barrier to wellness that I experienced in a medically underserved area. And those are the people who, even as you're waiting to seek advice, it would not be wrong if you're having horrendous cramping, excessive bleeding, horrible mood swings, particularly starting anywhere from days 9 to 14 of your cycle, where you're starting to drop in estrogen and in theory, rise in progesterone. If your mood is dysregulated and you have no other options, you can take organic, topical, bioidentical progesterone available. You can find it on Amazon. I think it's a $36 tube that'll likely last you 3 cycles at least, and see how you feel. Now, with any hormone replacement therapy, there is a risk of mood fluctuations because there's almost a backwards effect on your hormones and the signaling behind them. And any type of hormone replacement therapy, any type, can impact your mood and be cause negative feelings, suicidality, depression for the first 3 months, which is why I usually still find, you want to be established with a primary care. If you have a problem and you're not sure who to ask, you should be able to reach out to someone you could trust. But know that these are also temporary and can be expected, can be normal. And if they're manageable, you should continue to apply for at least 3 cycles until you'll see full benefits. Ideally 6, but at least 3 cycles until you'll really see impacts. I know you were sharing that you had already had some positive changes in your first cycle experience with progesterone, which also can happen. But typically, breakthrough bleeding will be common for the first 3 to 6 months. Spotting and even mood fluctuations. I personally, when I started my own topical progesterone therapy, I actually noticed more mood fluctuations in the first half of my cycle and my follicular phase, which was usually when I was feeling my best. But my second half of my cycle became so enjoyable. And then those lasted the second and third month of my window of trial for progesterone. And then they subsided. And so all hormone replacement therapy can carry a risk. And no one talks about this, especially not when we're prescribing oral contraceptives to 16-year-olds. No one tells them that this can impact you emotionally, both positive and negatively. And you won't really know where you'll stand fully for at least 3 to 6 months while your body adapts and adjusts to having this hormone. I still find progesterone to be, and in general, studies suggest it's the anti-stress hormone, and will actually help the feelings of anxiety and depression that you can experience in the luteal phase, your second half of your cycle. But getting there can take 3 months.
Gotcha. And how do we know for some, right. And how do we know if we're experimenting? And also just say something too, like even though I don't have a primary care and I don't have health insurance, I did some out-of-pocket lab testing with the MD who's also in functional, who I'm talking about, Kathy Parmalee. I'm actually going to do a shout out to her.
You can find Kathy Parmalee's info at Heal Thyself, healthyworld.com. You can also look at that as Healthy Self, healthyworld.com. Kathy Parmalee is an ER physician who also has a holistic practice.
She's great because it's the same thing. You can just book an appointment. She'll do labs. She also does like diet and other health things. I'll figure out more about what she does. But we had done some labs and everything came back normal. But trust me, the symptoms, for me, it really was, and it's crazy to say this, but it really was like a level of suicidality in those weeks for my period. I wanted to kill myself and others,
Same. and others, and others. Myself and others. Not that this is a laughing matter, but it is so common.
But it's real. And then I read this article that like the 85% of women that committed suicide did so in their luteal phase. I'm like, oh shit. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know right there.
You have a rapid drop in estrogen, which is when steady is very beneficial for your brain, but when depleting with no opposing progesterone is extremely irritating to your resting nervous system. Totally unable to balance and handle stress. You become more stress tolerant with higher levels of progesterone. But how can we know if we've overdone it? So a couple great awareness areas. One of the first places I find that you'll experience issues is vaginal dryness. And you might experience it almost like you're postmenopausal. So dryness, as well as these fine bumps that can occur vaginally. There are benign. They almost look like pimples, but they're not. That can suggest if you start developing vaginal dryness or bumps around the vagina, that can suggest too much progesterone. And so you would just slightly reduce your topical. In my opinion, I think the best way to start any therapy is low and slow. You can always add, you can't really take away. And so in general, when we're starting any sort of medication, my belief is we start with the lowest dose, which depending on what you get, what formulation you find, I would usually say 50 milligrams, 40 to 50 milligrams of progesterone, either daily or in divided doses, topically, like once or twice a day, is a reasonable way to start. And then you can increase anywhere from 75 to 80, again, either in 1 or 2 doses, depending on what works best for you. But that would be the best way to start. And I'll have to do some more research into other symptoms of progesterone dominance. It's just so uncommon that I just don't see it enough. But it does occur. It definitely can occur. So monitor vaginal dryness. Vaginal mucus is actually a huge indicator of female health, and is usually one of the best ways that you can identify ovulation and your own timing of your natural cycle when you're mid-cycle. In healthcare, there's a test, it's called the string test, where basically the thickness of your mucus, you can put it on 3 fingers and it will stick to all 3 fingers, almost like a small string. That's mid-cycle, when you can tell that you're fertile. So if you have too much progesterone, it will affect your ability to produce mucus. And that's a good way that you can tell. But you'll usually, there is a blood test, and now I'm not sure of the cash price. I have ordered this on women. You can do an estrogen to progesterone ratio, because in general, hormones, and especially in the US, lab work is for directly measuring your hormones can be done, but estrogen and progesterone both can be heavily bound to tissue, which means that they don't have very accurate levels in the serum, which is what we're drawing. When we draw your blood, we're assessing how much of this hormone is in your blood, but a lot of the hormone lives in your uterus, in the vagina lining, in the breast tissue, and not in the bloodstream. So sometimes blood tests can not be as reliable as far as true measurements of your active hormone, but you can measure the ratio of estrogen to progesterone. And I think the normal expected window for that is anywhere from 100 to 500. Yeah, as far as the ratio goes. And almost always the ratios that I've tested women on to come back estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance is a very common occurring condition, again, based on the environmental exposures, particularly BPAs from plastics, phthalates from fragrances, which are buried in the vast majority of all like fragrance fucking lotions, soaps, detergent,
Laundry, yeah.
laundry detergent, everything. And I mean, we are using these products multiple times a day
Yeah.
without any awareness that we are dousing ourselves in hormone mimickers, and we are causing a cascade of symptoms related to inappropriate hormone signalers. And so that is usually why I find, especially as we become closer to menopause, which can really, we are seeing now this is happening much more premature because of higher rates of estrogen exposures throughout life. Women will remain estrogen dominant and again have the symptoms that we previously discussed. And again, the way that you can know objectively, you can do an estrogen to progesterone ratio in blood. And that is often used also for monitoring. We check testosterone levels for men, and we also monitor testosterone levels for men when they do hormone replacement therapy. This is by far less common in women. And you can monitor after exposure to progesterone how it's affecting you and monitor your estrogen to progesterone ratio and see if you're in a normal range so your body can be balanced.
Okay, I love that. So if you have a lot of access to good health care, you can talk to your doctor, get some labs, go on the therapy, the hormone replacement therapy, like the topical creams that we're talking about. And then afterward, you can run some tests and have your doctor analyze them and see, you know, are my like comparative rates, are my, what's the word I'm looking for? Are my balances there, right?
Yeah.
And then if you don't have a ton of access to healthcare, you can kind of self-monitor, self-test. You could go ahead and, if you're meeting those symptoms, go ahead and try it. And then if you're noticing vaginal dryness, or what was the other big, the red bumps.
There's small bumps. Yeah, small bumps. You'll think it's an ingrown hair, but it won't. It's not. It'll be an abnormal bump, not abnormal.
Perfect. So that's really good. So that's kind of like that for your different, because different people are going to have access to different things, right? Women,
right,
at the menopausal level are probably well established in their life, and they're going to have that access to healthcare.
Exactly.
The 21-year-old out there just making ends right. You're to go ahead and self-monitor and give it a shot if you're feeling these things. Like, you're not precluded from participating either.
Correct.
I love
that. Yeah. Okay. And I would really encourage, I genuinely feel my influence on this was done by an integrative specialist, Dr. Leanne Keneally, one of the first people who really introduced the concept of progesterone as a almost universal, valuable tool to me. It is not a commonly touted traditional medicine product per se. Estrogen in general has always been the golden child in hormone replacement therapy, even in traditional both primary care as well as like gynecology. There are very few, in fact, very few people who follow a traditional medicine belief and practice and form of practice. They are not going to be informing you of this. This is not going to be something that your average doctor is going to talk to you about. This is not something that traditional medicine deems valuable at this point. And therefore, this is not something that is going to be readily encouraged even with routine primary care. And that's the truth. Like, this has never once ever been recommended to me as an individual by a traditional practitioner. And in general, you're going to go to see a gynecologist and talk to them, and they're going to put you on oral contraceptives. And that is what they know. And that is what the funded data will point to as valuable. And there are people that will benefit. We cannot say that they won't, but there are much greater risks to these to estrogen replacement than I think anybody's fully aware of. And we prescribe oral contraceptives all the freaking time for everything, whether it be the 16-year-old with irregular heavy periods or premenstrual syndrome, or even the postmenopausal woman with hot flashes now are getting prescribed oral contraceptives in the forms of estrogen and synthetic progesterones. And again, we are missing the mark as far as the mechanism behind why progesterone is alone is so valuable. So we may help women with oral contraceptives, and I'm not saying we don't. I'm absolutely saying we do, but we cannot deny that breast cancer is one of the most common cancers that A, occur in the U.S., and that B, that we die from, which is terrible. And I can't remember a day where a woman was diagnosed with breast cancer, my own patient, and had no exposure to synthetic estrogens at some point in her life. I can't. I really have yet to, maybe one of my 80-year-old patients who had never been on hormones, at which point was still exposed to synthetic estrogens her whole life through the environment, or at least the last 40 years of it, when we started really inventing the majority of these synthetic estrogens. So the options that you're traditionally going to be offered, I think people just need to know, are not going to be what we're talking about today, and can still be beneficial for some, particularly like if you, I have an individual experience of someone I know who found out that they were BRCA positive, which is the breast cancer gene. And this type of gene also increases your rates of ovarian cancer drastically, by about 40%. One of the values of oral contraceptives, one of the biggest, and in my opinion, primary values of traditional oral contraceptives, is they do reduce your risk of ovarian cancer by about 50%. It is because they stop ovulation. Topical progesterone therapy is not going to prevent pregnancy. And so it is not commonly a form of, like, women love oral contraceptives because they don't want to get pregnant. And the value in taking them is that you don't ovulate, and therefore, or reduce the frequency of ovulation. You can still ovulate on these, but much less likely. And reduced ovulation is shown to reduce your rates of ovarian cancer. However, we know that oral contraceptives will increase your rates and risk of cancer, and occasionally even uterine.
So I just love that you brought up, or I'm sorry, is there a thought you want to complete there?
That's it. So when you're going to your doctor, because I'm telling people to go see their doctor, but I'm telling you also that they're not going to recommend this, but they can rule out other problems, which I do find valuable, and they can make sure, again, they want to rule out other problems. They may or may not feel comfortable ordering an estrogen to progesterone ratio, depending on where they are and their practice. Even so, you can still, they will likely offer you oral contraceptives. You can make an educated choice on whether or not that's something you want to try. However, we know that 50% of the time they impact your mood negatively. Even IUDs, which is crazy. Even IUDs, even non-hormonal IUDs, 50% of the time can increase your rates, 40%, I think, increase risk of depression.
Wow.
So they will offer you treatments, and there are some benefits, but there are many risks. There are far fewer risks to bioidentical topical progesterone.
And like that,
not be prevented in pregnancy.
Right.
That's it.
And I love that you mentioned birth control at all, because what I was going to ask you, and you touched on it earlier, is based on everything you're saying, if I am thinking that I want to go on some form of birth control pill, would a now, although we know it's not bioidentical progesterone based on what you just said, what about new progesterone only birth control pills? What are your thoughts on those?
These are great questions. So this is the synthetic progestin. Norethindrone is the most common progesterone only prescription, and it is a synthetic progesterone, so it is not bioidentical. Therefore, it can carry similar risks to oral contraceptives that contain estrogen because some synthetic progesterones mimic estrogen and some of their effects. So I personally, do I continue to prescribe oral contraceptives in my practice? I do. I counsel people extensively on the risks. And personally, I practice family planning. So I'm not on any technical contraceptive other than I track my cycle, I abstain when I'm most fertile, or use a condom, and I use progesterone to help with the side effects of heavy menstrual cramping, bleeding, and mood disorders. And I find in this point in my life, I am the most balanced that I've ever been, and I took oral contraceptives for 16 years. I will also note, just in my personal experience, while on an oral contraceptive, I found a fibroadenoma in my breast, which is a benign, technically, firm nodule that develops. And they are common occurrences with oral contraceptives. And it is because of the high levels of estrogen exposure. The breast tissue is highly sensitive to high levels of estrogen, and high levels of estrogen are associated with both the formation of fibroadenomas and fibrocystic breast disease. Both of these conditions increase your risk of breast cancer later in life. With the use of topical progesterone, my fibroadenoma is gone. It is completely gone. I have no. I found my own. It is. I found my first breast mass when I was 18, and it is gone since I've been 33.
Wow.
Because of my topical, yes. So it is unbelievable. So again, they're completely FDA approved, and we know that this increases your rates of cancer.
Wow.
We can see it in real time.
So just because of some fake artificial progesterone-based only birth control doesn't necessarily mean it's any safer. And you said that earlier you said the progesterone, like the artificial progesterone, it can mimic estrogen and mimic the same symptoms that an estrogen-based birth control could show.
Right.
Am I getting that right?
Correct. You are correct. It can mimic estrogen, and it still carries similar risks to the oral contraceptives. But bioidentical progesterone in and of itself, lots of studies will tell you progesterone is associated with certain cancers like germ cell tumors, which arise from the uterus, basically. Uterus or ovaries. Honestly, I have to look that one up. And certain breast cancers we assess whether they're progesterone receptor responsive or not. But bioidentical progesterone in and of itself is one of the most anti-cancer substances known to man, which is why women who achieve pregnancy have you reduce your rates of both breast and uterine cancer, as well as increase your overall life expectancy just from pregnancy due to the high levels of bioidentical progesterone that occur for 9 months, 10 months while you're pregnant.
Wow. It makes you think of that episode of Samantha at Sex and the City where she gets a new doctor because her doctor said she got breast cancer because she didn't have kids. She was like, F you, I'm out.
Yeah, fuck that guy. And you know what? It's not that she didn't have kids that was the problem. It was the environment that gave her cancer because it mimicked estrogen. The fact that she didn't have kids didn't protect her, but she didn't get cancer because she didn't have children. She got cancer because she was exposed to environmental triggers that caused it. And fuck that doctor in this series.
But I love that. And I've heard stories too that there's people there's so much estrogen based birth control being prescribed that they're starting to find it in our water, and it actually leading to infertility, which is so fucked up.
It is so fucked up. This is what breaks my heart. You just hit on such a sensitive spot for me, which is so funny. We blame women. Blame women for everything, for every occurrence, for their own breast cancer, for their own hormonal fluctuations, for the moodiness that occurs from a natural condition of menopause that we go through. We blame women, and we have been arguably completely inadequate when it comes to caring for women and women's health. Completely inadequate. And the offerings that we give women to regulate their hormones and to help cystic acne and to help prevent, PMS and PMDD, what we offer you could kill you, frankly, can increase your rates of breast and uterine cancer, and arguably any other cancer, can increase your rates of blood clots. We just removed a black box warning from estrogen. And yet the irony, which the black box warning is the greatest level of warning that a prescription medication can have by the FDA because it's known to cause some sort of harm. And we just removed it from topical estrogens because it did limit the amount of women that we could offer this to. And again, I will say in this statement, I acknowledge that many women will benefit from estrogen therapy. And many women will feel better taking estrogen, particularly postmenopausal, once you no longer create your own. Many women report, and I have seen it help women, particularly emotionally. I've tried to take women off of estrogen therapy that they've been on it for years. I've never seen such a interesting sight. This woman sob cried. I reduced her estrogen tablet to a half tablet. She was a wreck emotionally. Went back to a full tablet. This woman didn't have a uterus, so estrogen therapy alone is appropriate and indicated. She didn't technically get prescribed progesterone, but usually we have to always prescribe progesterone to balance estrogen because of, again, the risks of estrogen therapy. Anyway, this woman did phenomenal with it. So this whole podcast, the bottom line is healthcare is individualized, but what we offer primarily is arguably more harmful than good, in my opinion. And it doesn't mean that people won't benefit from our traditional treatments. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have them accessible. But we need to approach women's health from a completely different mindset, where we stop just repleting things and start looking at how things actually function and why is this happening. And we really need to address the environment. Okay, go on and on.
Yeah,
I don't think because the environment is what it puts us the most at risk.
for sure. Well, I absolutely love this.
Okay, that wraps up our podcast with Lindsey. I hope you found it informative. Remember, the takeaways are, if you're meeting any of the symptoms listed, sleeplessness, PMS, etc., you may be a good candidate for progesterone therapy. The easiest and most accessible is topical progesterone cream that you can find online at Amazon. Remember that you're looking for bioidentical only. Anything else that's not bioidentical is going to mimic estrogen, which is not the goal here. If you are menopausal or postmenopausal, you're going to be applying it 25 days on, 5 days off. If you're still having a period of any form, you're going to try to match it to your cycle. There are instructions on the back of the bottle. Like I said, I personally use this myself. I absolutely love it. And you're going to be using it on day 12 to 25 of your cycle, and it'll stop on day 25. So I hope you loved it. Let me know if you have any comments and questions. Also, I did want to point out, I know that there are some funny background noises. Those came about once I used an AI editor to make the quality of the conversation better, because I did this over the telephone. Once I did that, I'll start hearing all these funny sounds in the background. So I apologize for that. It's our first episode and we're figuring it out, but I hope you got the great content out of this over everything else. Love you guys. Bye-bye.